أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salamun alaikum, brothers and sisters. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of us on this auspicious occasion of Eid al-Ghadeer and Eid al-Mubahilla. Without further ado, I would like to call upon Isa Hussein to come and present his mankabat. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
नारे हैदरी जानम फिदाए हैदरी या अली 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 जान جانم فدائے حیدری یا علی 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 ہے محمد میرا دل تو سینہ علی میرے جینے کا واحد کرینہ علی دین اسلام کا ہے نگینہ علی حق کے منزل کا پہلا ہے زینہ علی دشت میں ابر کا پہلا قطرہ علی میرا مرشد بھی آقا بھی مولا علی علی مولا علی ہر سو صدائے حیدری یا علی 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 جانم فدائے حیدری یا علی 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 جانم فدائے حیدری یا علی 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 صبح سے شام تک حل پہ ہر گھڑی لب پہ اپنے رہے نعرہ حیدری یعنی خیبر شکن یعنی مشکل کشا پر از تک ہے دوسرا آسرا میں مصیبت میں اب کیوں پریشان ہو غم کے ماروں کا ہے تو سہارا علی علی مولا علی رمز بقائے ہاشمی یا علی 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 جانم فدائے حیدری یا علی 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 جانم فدائے حیدری یا علی 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 بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات
Jazakallah, Brother Isa. I would like to call upon Brother Ali and Brother Muhammad to come present the mankabat with the last salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
صلی علی محمد و آل محمد
جہرا جہرا لیدہ حبدار نے جہرا جہرا لیدہ حبدار نے انہیں جنت دا ہونا حقدار نے لاؤ نارا لیدہ خوب کو لاؤ نارا لیدہ نارا لیدہ یعنی حق دے ولیدہ خوب کو لاؤ نارا لیدہ خوب کو لاؤ نارا لیدہ حق دا امام علی نائب رسول حق دا امام علی نائب رسول ہے بابا حسنین دائے شوہر بطول قابد شان علی زینت اذان علی دینت ایمان علی حق دی ہے جان علی جینا مرشد علی سرکار نے جینا مرشد علی سرکار نے اور جنت دا ہورا حقدار نے لاؤ نارا لیدہ خوب کو لاؤ نارا لیدہ علی علی کے روالے ولی بر جانے نے علی علی کہنے والے ولی بر جانے نے
شام سے بتائی لال بری بر جانے نے لیکن سنانا مولی آکو سر مالی حق دا پیام علی بولو صبح و شام علی
جیرا من دالینو سردار نے جیرا من دالینو سردار نے ان جنت دا ہورا حقدار نے لاؤ نارا لیدا نارا لیدا یعنی حق دے ولیدا خوب لاؤ نارا مجمع سے حاج یادا خمدا میدان سی مجمع سے حاج یادا خمدا میدان سی من کنت مولا کیتا نبی نے اعلان سی مولا جان علی نبی دے جان علی شیر یزدان علی شاہ مردان علی جیرا کردہ لیدہ اقرار نہیں جیرا کردہ لیدہ اقرار نہیں اور جنت دا ہونا حقدار نہیں لاؤ نارا لیدہ خوب خونا نارا لیدہ یعنی حق دے ولیدہ خوب خونا نارا لیدہ
حق دا امام علی نائب رسول ہے
حق دا امام علی نائب رسول ہے
بابا سنین دائے شوہر بطول ہے قابض شان علی زینت ازان علی دینت ایمان علی
حق دی ہے جان علی جینا مرشد علی سرکار نے جینا مرشد علی سرکار نے ان جنت دا ہونا حقدار نے لاؤ نارا لیدہ خوب لاؤ نارا لیدہ یعنی حق دے ولیدہ خوب لاؤ نارا لیدہ صلی علی محمد وآل محمد Jazakallah, the Rashid brothers. I would like to call upon Brother Zain to come and present his manqabat salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات خدا کا مختصر خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک مگر بھاری غلاکھوں پر محمد سے محمد تک خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک مزہ جائے گا مدح ابو طالب سنانے کا مزہ جائے گا مدح ابو طالب سنانے کا، ملیں گے قبر کے اندر محمد سے محمد تک. یا علی. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. نصیری کس کو اپنا رب مانے گا تو آخر. نصیری کس کو اپنا رب مانے گا تو آخر. نظر آتے ہیں سب حیدر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. فلانے سے فلانے تک سبھی رہبر تمہارے ہیں. فلانے سے فلانے تک سبھی رہبر تمہارے ہیں. ہمارے منتخب رہبر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. در خاتون جنت تیری عظمت کی بیریا جانے. در خاتون جنت تیری عظمت کی بیریا جانے. کھڑے ہیں سب جھکائے سر محمد سے محمد تک. بچایا دین کو ہم نے، بچایا ہم کو زینب نے. بچایا دین کو ہم نے، بچایا ہم کو زینب نے. ہاں خدا سے کہتے ہیں اکثر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. نبوت حضرت آدم کو ملنا غیر ممکن تھی. نبوت حضرت آدم کو ملنا غیر ممکن تھی. نہ ہوتے نام جو ازبر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. تلاوت ہو گئی قرآن کی محسوس ہوتا ہے. تلاوت ہو گئی قرآن کی محسوس ہوتا ہے. فقط ایک منقبت پڑھ کر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک. مگر بھاری ہے لاکھوں پر محمد سے محمد تک. خدا کا مختصر سر لشکر محمد سے محمد تک پر محمد والے محمد صلوات.
I would like to call upon Brother Hussein to come and present his manqabat. Allahu salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی کا دروازہ، بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی کا دروازہ، علی کا دروازہ، علی کا دروازہ، فضیلتوں نے بھی ڈھونڈا علی کا دروازہ، علی کا دروازہ، علی کھڑے تھے لوگ بہت انتظار میں، لیکن کھڑے تھے لوگ بہت انتظار میں، لیکن ستارہ دیکھ کے اترا علی کا دروازہ، بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی. نبی کے شہر میں تم کس طرح سے جاؤ گے، نبی کے شہر میں تم کس طرح سے جاؤ گے، کہ راستے میں پڑے گا علی کا دروازہ، بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی کا دروازہ. قسم ہے خانہ کعبہ تیرے تبسم کی، خدا کے گھر میں بھی دیکھا علی کا دروازہ، بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی کا دروازہ. رسول جب شب معراج عرش پر پہنچے، رسول جب شب معراج عرش پر پہنچے، فراز عرش بھی دیکھا علی کا دروازہ، بھلا عظیم ہے کتنا علی کا دروازہ، علی کا دروازہ، علی کا دروازہ. صلوات علی محمد وآل محمد.
Jazakallah, Brother Hussein. Before I call upon our scholars, we have a Quran recitation by our students from class 4. I would like to call upon the two students from class 4 from the girls and 2 from the boys, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Fatima Panjwani, Fatima Jafar, and Isa Hussein, and Ibrahim Hassan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Come here. Boys, stand here. Ji? Oh, yeah? Stand here. Muhammad wa ali وآل محمد صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى وما خلق الذكر والأنثى إن سعيكم لشتى فأما من أعطى واتقى وصدق بالحسنى فسنيسره لليسرى وأما من بخل واستغنى وكذب بالحسنى فسنيسره للأسرى وما يغني عنه ماله إذا تردى إن علينا للهدى وإن لنا للآخرة والأولى فأنذرتكم نارا تلظى لا يصلاها إلا الأشقى الذي كذب وتولى وسيجنبها الأتقى الذي يؤتي ماله يتزكى وما لأحد عنده من نعمة تجزى إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى ولسوف يرضى. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي أخرج المرعى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفحت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Surah Allah has two parts. In the first part, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and asks him to perform tasbih and deliver the message. Then he mentions 7 attributes. In the second part, Allah tells Prophet Muhammad, Allah speaks about the loyal and the faithful companions, worshippers of, and about the disbelievers. Then he speaks about the reasons of the success and failure on the day of judgment.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I would like to tell you about the merits of Surah Al-A'la. Imam Jafar Sadiq has said that whoever recites this surah in his daily or mustahab prayers, he will be told to enter heaven through any door he chooses. One of Imam Ali's companions prayed behind him from 20 nights. He heard Imam Ali recite this surah every night. When he asked about this, Imam replied, "If you knew the merits of this surah, you would recite it 20 times a day."
Santum, thank you so much for contributing with us in the Quran way. Just Ibrahim, stay here. Of course, we try, as you noticed, to concentrate with the kids on Ahkam al-Tajweed even in class 4. And we noticed that both of the kids, they tried their best in order to perform Tajweed while recitation. And Isa as well, he memorized well the merits of the surah and the narrations, and Fatima as well, Fatima Punjwani. And it's something that we try to teach them here with the Quran, the respect towards the narrations and the words of Ahlul Bayt about the surahs that we try to learn and we try to memorize, and the importance of these surahs. As you saw, they did a very good job. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. So this is just a simple gift for your efforts that you did in order to memorize the surahs. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the blessing of Surah Al-A'la, you will enter heaven through the door that you choose. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you so much. Thank you. Fatima, thank you so much. Thank you.
Jazakallah Sheikhna, Jazakallah all the students. Without further ado, I would like to request our respected scholars, Sheikh Mohammed Mehdi and Sheikh Mohsen Nasser, to come and present the presentation. Inshallah, with Allah, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. So before we start, first, can I just get everyone to move a little bit forward? Let's not be scared of the sheikhs. Abbas, if I can get you just to push that first partition back a little bit for me. Okay, just a little bit back there. So today we are going to do something similar. We're going to do something similar to what we did, I think, last year, Sheikh, when we discussed Ghadeer and Mubahilla as a discussion rather than a lecture, because I think we have a lot of lectures to listen to coming up, so we'll change that. We also had questions sent to us on our email, and the best 3 questions will be asked by the sheikh, or the sheikhs will answer the 3 questions, and inshallah we'll give a prize at the end for the 3. And we'll hopefully have a bit of fun doing this whole process as well. If you do have a question to ask, and it's very, very good, please put your hand up. I'm sure I'll be happy to take that question there. But I think we have quite a few questions to start. So to start the proceedings, if you don't mind, Sheikh Mohammed, I'll start with you first, if you don't mind, being our elder scholar. Well, Sheikh Mohsen is our younger scholar here. Why does Eid Ghadeer hold a special place in your heart? You can use the mic there if you don't mind, Sheikh. It's not...
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Inshallah, it's Eid Mubarak upon you all. Praise be to Allah that we are still firm upon the wilaya and the allegiance to Ali ibn Abi Talib, the commander of the faithful and the Imma, and we're still firm in the wilaya and the bara'a of their enemies. Why does it hold a valuable place in my heart? Well, this is my beating heart. You know, one person once said to me, why is it that our love for Imam Ali alayhi salam, it's different? There's nothing like it. And this is what will give you the value. I told him a story of once where a man was brought to the Imam, and this man had been accused of theft. And then the Imam asked him, did you steal? He said, yes. He said, I'm going to ask you a second time, and if you do respond that you stole, then I have to do the had. We have to cut your hand off from the knuckles, because the had has to be done on you. And he confessed to it. So then the had happened, and they wrapped up his hand and he left. As he was walking out, an enemy of Imam Ali alayhi salam came up to him and he said, beautiful, I've got an opportunity. Someone has been punished by the Amir. Let me talk together and we can slander him together. So he said, who cut your hand? And he said, Sayyidi wa Mawlai, my master, Sayyid al-Wasiyin, wa Imam al-Muttaqin, wa Amir al-Mu'minin, Asadullah al-Ghalib. One madh after another, one thing after another, praise upon praise, Ali ibn Abi Talib. So then this man went to the Imam and said, I have seen something that, bewilders me. He said, what did you see? He said, I saw a man, and he tells him the story. So then the Imam calls his son Al-Hasan, and he said, go call your uncle. Called this man, whose title was Al-Aswad. He goes, go call him and bring him back. So then he says to the Imam, when he brings him, he said, why did you say this praise about me? And he said, oh my master, how could I say otherwise? Obviously I'm paraphrasing the narration. He said, how could I say otherwise when your love is intertwined in my blood and my flesh? And then the Imam, through miracle, made his hand whole. Now this is my response. This Eid is so great for me because it's within my wujud, my essence. It's intrinsic within my nature. That it's the best thing that I hear is the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this is why the Eid al-Ghadir holds that favor with me, because it's Ali's Eid. That's why.
That's okay, Sheikh Mohsen, you're going to have a tough time to beat that one. I'm going to hand over to you. We'll change the question for you. Why does Mubahilla hold a special place for you? The event of Mubahilla.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Of course, to answer this, it's something that, a question that comes to the mind for everyone who grows older and he sees different kind of sects, different kind of religions in front of him, and every religion claims to be the one that is successful. And then when I look at the message that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with, and usually nowadays when a person has a business or wants to have a plan, he tries his best to hire someone else in order to make this plan work or function, even if he wants to pay money, but as long as he's not getting tired. When it comes to the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he didn't, sallu ala Muhammad wa sallu ala Muhammad. And I see that the Prophet salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi was willing, when mubahala or mula'ana was something back then, since before Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, until the time of Rasulullah, and it's something that people believed in. When the priests of the Christians, they came in order to do la'n or curse upon each other, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make happen. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, instead of bringing anyone else of the Muslimin, he brought the closest of his family, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Fatima al-Zahra, and Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn, to sacrifice them. When I see that Rasulullah is willing to sacrifice these people that no one knows their value but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Ali, ma arafaka illa Allah wa ana, oh Ali, no one knows you but Allah and me. When I see the sacrifice of the Prophet, of course I know that this religion was meant to be for my own success, to save me, and I won't be able to give anything but to love and to make it something that's so special in my life.
So the ultimate, I guess the challenge we get always is that with Ghadeer, you say, well, it's not quite narrated. Brother, I'll just get him to take that balloon to the other side on this. He can play there comfortably. Abbas, you want to maybe help him to take him to there, please? Make sure he stays on one side, not to go backwards and forwards, please. All right? Can Can I have one of the sisters to help this young boy just to go to the children's area, please? If someone could please take him to the children's area. For Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. We get a lot of questions asked about Ghadeer, right? That well, if Allah wanted it to be clear, He would have written it in the Quran. And there's not actually enough evidence to prove that it happened, and you know, every other mix-up that happens with that side of it there. How would you explain to someone who says there's not sufficient proof that Ghadeer took place? Let you decide who would like to go first.
The question is inaccurate because there is sufficient proof unanimously amongst the Muslims. There's no denial of the fact that it actually took place. So the question, if it can be rephrased, was when you said something, there's no Sunni scholar worth his salt that says that it didn't take place. So your question's
no, the question
incorrect.
is regarding the elevation of Imam Ali alayhi salam when the Prophet declares him the Mawla after himself. Right? They're saying, yes, Ghadeer happened, the last verse came that the Quran has been completed and the message is complete. And they'll say, well, it didn't actually mean that Imam Ali was the appointed leader. You know, he just, you know, he was his friend or he was his cousin, or there's every excuse made not to accept that Imam Ali was the appointed, rightfully godly appointed leader.
Well, I remember when I think the deputy commissioner for New South Wales was police commissioner. He was sent overseas to investigate the Hariri assassination. And what they told him is, this is the result, you have to take us to this result. So in other words, this is the criminal, make the evidence work, so this is the person that's accused. This is the same. See, when the Prophet comes to the house of Aisha and says, from here will rise the horn of the devil, Hun al-Fitna, and he says it 3 times, okay? Someone in parentheses, in brackets, writes, he was pointing to the east. Okay, he says he didn't say there. Huna. And he was in front of the house of Aisha. This is where all the fitna and the problems will arise for the ummah, you know? And he was very clear. However, they will sway away. Same things here. Suddenly, this important event where all the Muslims have been rounded up just so the Prophet can say that Ali is his bosom buddy, his pal, his best friend, you know, we're going to go chill at the cafe this afternoon, we're good friends, we're homies, and whatever. If that is the, yani it's ludicrous to say the least. Anyone that reads this obviously will go and understand that the result that they want, it's like when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi Jibreel came down and gave him a bird to eat, yani, from the Jannah, and said, this meal from the Jannah is for you. And Rasulullah raised his hands and said, oh Allah, let me share this meal with whoever is most beloved to my heart. And Aisha heard this. So she sent a messenger to call Abu Bakr. Okay? She got to the door was knocked. And who is this? The person on the door said, Ali. Is the Prophet here? She said, no. So Ali walked away. She was waiting for her father to come. Then Ali, something made him come back. He knocked on the door a second time. Who is it? It's Ali. Is Rasulullah home? No. On the third time when he returned, Rasulullah called out, Adkhul ya Ali. He called for him to enter. So she was trying to fix it to let her father come in, to answer the prayer of the Prophet. See, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's not going to work to, you know, as much as you're trying to, you know when you're a child and you have that little puzzle and it's a triangular hole and you're trying to put the circle in there, circle's not going to go in the triangle. As much as they try to do that, if they break the circle in half, just to get it in. You know, there's two proverbs you can use. One, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And the other one is, an ape's an ape, a varlet's a varlet, though they be clad in silk or scarlet. So regardless of how you try and fix the situation, it is what it is. And that's what, it's obvious what it is. For them to say it's a happy Friends Day, Friendship Day, that's up to them, you know.
Just the example of what the Sheikh said that recently, not recently, they always bring up this example, is that they try to change the meaning of Mawla. So even if the Ghadeer happened and the Quran mentions that it happened, they try to change the word Mawla depending on the tricks in Arabic language. So Arabic language, they have some expressions that have several meanings. So they wanted to say that Mawla has several meanings, and it's one of these expressions that has several meanings, like the word Ayn, eye. Eye can mean this eye can mean a spring in Arabic, eye can mean the gold, and eye can mean a spy. So Mawla here, even in Arabic, it only has one meaning. But they have three scholars, one that says that has 20 meanings, one that says it has 30 meanings, one that says that it has 37 meanings, and this is the maximum amount that they reached. But they cut the sermon of Rasulullah, and it begins with what Rasulullah says, أَلَسْتُ أَوْلَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, النَّبِيُّ أَوْلَى بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. The Prophet is more worthy than myself to have control over myself. Then he says, أَلَسْتُ أَوْلَى بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَوْلَى. Then he says, مَنْ كُنْتُ مَوْلَى فَعَلِيُّ مَوْلَى. So the same rule that happens to me, or the same control that I have, it goes to Ali ibn Abi Talib, and this is like the answer to it.
Thank you, Sheikh. Sheikh, if we take away the event at Ghadeer, means in reference to Imam Ali being appointed as a mullah, we take that away for a moment. Okay, imagine it didn't exist for a moment. Can you give us the examples in the Quran that refers to Imam Ali alayhi salam?
The verses in the Quran that refers.
Doesn't have
we
to,
have
you
in
don't
the,
have to
in the
remember.
narrations that more than a third of the Quran is about Ali ibn Abi Talib. But the
Just
Quran,
a few examples for our kids, youngers, to actually
the Quran
understand.
doesn't mention Amir al-Mu'mineen by name. And sometimes to mention someone by the characteristics can be more subtle. Let's say more than one person is called Ali ibn Abi Talib at the time, for example. And then Allah mentions Ali. Everyone can say that they even changed, they put someone else who was born in the Kaaba, they mentioned a different name, and it was obvious that it was Ali ibn Abi Talib. So to mention someone by characteristics, it's something that's more subtle. When I mentioned that instead of the name, I will tell you about someone with a unique characteristics, someone who gave out his ring while he was praying after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi made sure that the group of people around him, as he goes to the masjid, and the verse came down before he entered the masjid, and then Ali ibn Abi Talib was praying and giving the ring to the beggar. Then the verse that speaks about, what was the verse, Sheikhna? إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون. And آية المباهلة وأنفسنا وأنفسكم. And when when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I do mubahala or mula'ana, he speaks himself while he is in that group. He doesn't repeat mentioning himself twice. And all the mufassirin, even the Sunnis, they say anfusana was meant. And I have some narrations, but I didn't know that Hajj Abbas is going to mix up the questions. So any of the questions, yeah.
No,
Maybe this is the first one.
No, the questions I sent you was the competition. Yes, exactly. That's why I want to prove to them that the questions I sent you were the competition. This is just an impromptu discussion. See, I get to ask all my questions here.
عما يتساءلون.
He's pretty good at this pop quiz. Trust me, I've done this before with him. It ends up in me being in trouble. Sorry, Sheikh.
So the main verse, as I said, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ, which is as well refers to the word Mawla. And we have the verse about al-Mubahala. And all the narrations mentions that Rasulullah strictly brought with him Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra and al-Hasan al-Hussein. And as we notice, The verse mentions first the wife and the kids, and then later he mentions أنفسنا. So he first gave out Fatima al-Zahra, then Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, and then finally, which is the most precious thing, was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, وَعَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ عَنِ النَّبَأِ الْعَظِيمِ. And if you want to count, we can't even control the time here. We have only limited time.
No, thank you for answering it like
Just
this.
one thing.
Yes.
A question like that's very difficult to ask because there's too many.
I know.
And this is what happens. It's like everything's, when you ask about this kind of question, Sheikh Mohsen was thinking, where do I start? It's very difficult because but one of the very important points that the Sheikh made is a subtlety. Because when you mention a description, there's no way that can be played around with. There's no way that you could say it was someone else. It's there and it's apparent. Just as he mentioned the verses. And there's like many other verses that are known. And this isn't, see, the thing is, this isn't our opinion. This is unanimous. Wherever you go, you will find this. For example, in the tafsir for Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, when he mentions al-Jahr bi Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the Quran, whether we say Bismillah loudly in Salah or not. And he mentions all these people that say that you shouldn't. But then he says, Ali ibn Abi Talib says we should. And because the Prophet said, Aliyum ma'al haq, wal haqqu ma'ali, we go with Ali's opinion. Why is it only for this? Why is it not for everything else? So all these verses within the Quran that are linked and are about Ali ibn Abi Talib, even those that did not accept his wilayah cannot but concede that they attribute mention. Huh? Hala, if we want to go down why his name's not mentioned in the Quran, this is one of the questions, there's obscure questions you get asked. Why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? If God's all powerful, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? Why didn't God name all the Imams in the Quran? You always hear this. These questions, they're all obscurities. If I asked you, do you love your child? Who here is not going to say they love their child? If one says, I love my child, do you give your child everything they ask for? And you say no, and then I say, you don't love your child. Who says that the measurement of love to my child is to give them everything? In other words, we set the parameters, we set what is required. We say, oh Allah, if Ali is the wali, this is how the Quran must be written. Number one, the Quran is not our only source. We have two primary sources. And this is reiterated over and over again. And Allah deliberately misses things in the Quran, so you turn to Ahlul Bayt. For example, how do you pray? If I give you the Quran, can you read how to pray in the Quran? Can you find even the Hajj, all the things? Do you know Ahkam al-Hajj in the Quran? No. Do you know the rulings for fasting in the Quran? No. Does it mention everything in the Quran? No. Deliberately, so you don't sit there and become one of the people, Jama'at Hasbuna Kitab Allah, the ones that think that the book of God is sufficient. Because the book of God is not lacking, we are lacking. We lack, we need the Imam, because the Imam is the support for our understanding of the Quran. So we try and choose, we say, oh Allah, why don't you put this in the Quran? You have these Wahhabi apologists that get up and they'll talk and they say, oh, why doesn't it mention the 12 Imams in the Quran? Isn't this your belief? Don't you believe in, this is exactly how they say it. Don't you believe in Salah, Saum, Hajj, Zakat, and 12 Imams? That's a lie. Our hadith is Bunya al-Islamu ala khams. As-salat. The Islam was built upon 5. As-salat. Was-siyam. Wal-hajj. Was-zakat. What's the last one? Al-wilaya. Is wilaya mentioned in the Quran? Innama waliyukum Allah. So it is mentioned. So the way the hadith is it's mentioned. But that's not what is meant. They want it written the way they want. For example, I've seen the Quranists where they will say, I was once debating with one over 20 years ago. And he said to me, my shahada is ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. That's it. I said, what about the Prophet? He said, there's no shahada for the Prophet. I said, it says Muhammadun Rasulullah. He said, but it doesn't say Ashhadu Anna Muhammadun Rasulullah. Literalist, Wahhabi, Yadullah fawqa aydihim. You know, God's got a hand, you know, that goes above their hand. The literalists, they read the Quran and they explain it the way that they wish to explain it. Could you imagine someone acting out Shakespeare in drama school, and they do a Mark Antony's line, ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ears, and they'd rip off the ear and throw it to him? Like, seriously, this is what ends up happening when you're sitting with a group of literalists. This is the way that they perceive this. When it comes to the Quran and the way that the Quran is written, it's Allah who chooses how the Quran is written. Allah chooses what's in the Quran. If I asked every single one of us right now in this room to write what should be included in the Quran and what should not be, wait, hold on. Even Umar ibn Khattab had an opinion. This is in Sahih Bukhari. He says, if I did not fear the people's reaction, I would have added verses about stoning in the Quran. So even he had a problem with the completion of the Quran that he said is sufficient. He said, Hasbuna kitabullah. Yeah, I can't help it. I have to always include them into my discussion. You know, there's no wilaya without bara'ah. So even there, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, even there's manipulation in for them. They don't even believe that the Quran has been completed. So where I want the Quran to be designed, it's not by my design. There's a creator who has a perfect design. And nothing is missing in this creator's grand scheme in how everything should be. But Ali ibn Abi Talib is throughout the whole Quran. Blind people can't see. You can't make them see. And it's there, and from beginning to end, they go through it. They can begin from the ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, from the very beginning, it's Ali ibn Abi Talib, right to the end. You know, there's nothing missing there. Sorry,
That's okay.
I had to go on a bit of a rant there.
I think everyone appreciates it. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, and then we'll come back to those questions because I'm watching the time as well. I'd like to hear your personal favorite or examples of Imam Ali alayhi salam's compassion and mercy in battles. That one that stands out for you both. Which one? That you would say, this is one that's special to me. I know there's many, but just give me one or two that you would recommend. And if you can add the moment about the sword and how he gets presented the sword of Zulfikar, if you don't mind.
Okay. Firstly, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For me, one of the stories that stands out with Amir al-Mu'mineen in the battle is in one, I can't remember which battle it was, where he takes a prisoner with him. And if you want to know how civilized nation is, they say, look at its prisoners and how they treat their prisoners. And I'm not talking, see, when you look at Australia, I'm not talking about Silver Water and Long Bay. I'm talking about Christmas Island. You know, so don't be deceived. Don't look at the way that because they outsource prisons. You know, there's like Camp Astray. Don't think these people are treating their prisoners in the way that you perceive it. No, if you want to know how civilized society is, look at the way they treat their prisoner. You know what I mean? So Amir al-Mu'mineen in one battle takes a prisoner with him. And yet these prisoners, they don't know. This is a soldier, I think it would have been in Siffin. Because he would have been one of those people that was told that Ali is a monster. So he grabs the arm of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and he says, please don't kill me. And the Imam looks at him and says, you are in the position of a brother now. As a prisoner, you have rights. You have rights. You eat with us. You have a position now. You're not just someone that gets put into the gulags. We're not going to send you to Siberia. We're not going to do something like this to you. You are someone that has rights. You are going to be treated in the best possible way. Yet this person was hell-bent on killing Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And this is why he came to war. This is a vantage point of looking at the benevolence of God, because Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are the manifestation of God's mercy. This is why their character in mercy is beyond belief. You know, sometimes when you do something wrong, you know, people will say to you, you know, why don't you act like the Prophet? Are you serious? You think anyone can act like the Prophet? Anyone can act like Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim? They're on another level. The way that they forgave is incomparable. That's the story. As for the other one you asked, was the sword of Dhul Fiqar. See, in the Battle of Badr, although if you've been deceived by the message like we were when we were children, and they'd show you the sword was in Badr, it wasn't even in Badr. In Badr, they were, you know, in Badr it was like, it was antiquities, right? And I think they only had one sword. Eventually they got 6 because of the, I think some people put sticks forward, and through miracle, Rasulullah made them in swords. They ended up with 6 swords, they had nothing. In Badr and Al-Pas, and I think they had about 6 bits of armor. So they had nothing in Badr. In Uhud, what happened is Amir al-Mu'mineen's hand was shattered, and so was his sword. His sword was broken into pieces from fighting. You know, unlike, you know, when the swords of the other companions, the runners, they were still in pristine condition, never used. So, you know, if you went onto marketplace, you know, it'd be ticked, brand new, hardly ever used. Theirs would be never used, you know, probably only used it for running. But anyway, when we go back to this sword got broken into pieces. When it got broken into pieces, Jibreel came down with a sword from heaven. This sword that he brought down was a gift from God to Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is where Dhul Fiqar came in. It was from the Imam's fighting with whatever he had, and this was his gift to work in the service of Islam. And this is where he was gifted. He was gifted after he had already showed his position. It wasn't a magical scimitar or something, you know. It wasn't like something where you would see, or it's a sort of magical or mystical powers. It was something where, even to the point when Harun sought the sword, he went looking for Dhul Fiqar, and he wanted it. They said, one of his advisors said, why are you looking for Dhul Fiqar? He said, I wanted the sword that subdued the Arabs. And his advisor said it wasn't the sword that subdued the Arabs, but the hand that wielded that sword. This is what people, you know, a good workman never blames his tools, you know. It's that is the position that.
So you mean it's not Excalibur?
No, it's not. No, Excalibur wasn't magical. It was Excalibur, because it was actually King Arthur was the only one that could pull Excalibur from the stone. So it'd actually be a good example there. But the other one's fantasy. This is fact.
This is true. Yeah. Sheikh Mohsen, what's your favorite moment of compassion?
Would be your favorite one, where Malik al-Ashtar, when he comes back in the battle, bragging about that he killed more than Amir al-Mu'mineen. You tell me that story all the time.
No, you told me.
Yeah. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen would say that I don't just see that he's my enemy and I kill him straight away, but I look into the generation, the 7th generation, out of his loins, there would be someone who's a muwali. So this is how much love Amir al-Mu'mineen has towards a person who's a muwali. And then, of course, if he doesn't build that love in his heart and he acts upon this love, it's a shame, you know. Another story, but that doesn't speak about the compassion. It speaks about a problem that we are going through now in the community, where we say, "An-nadra sahmun min siham iblis." The look is an arrow of the arrows of Iblis. Where Amir al-Mu'mineen in the battle, when the enemy of the Islam and a person who was so dangerous, who was cunning, the only way he could escape Amir al-Mu'mineen is by taking off his clothes. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, just for the sake of hishma and haya and out of shyness, even that he was the same gender as Amir al-Mu'mineen, he covered his eyes. But now we need a very strong excuse in order to try to lower our gaze. And we need to try to convince the people with that. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen is setting the perfect example in the battle, and that person is threatening the people's lives and the Muslims' lives. And for the sake of haya and shyness and ahkam Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Amir al-Mu'mineen was willing to let him go.
Thank you for the answer. Sheikh, you answered something I wanted you to actually say. I think you've said what I was looking for, is that it wasn't the sword that was magic. It was the person using the sword who was just amazingly different to everybody else. It's not that we could pick up that sword and do what Imam Ali alayhi salam did. And I think sometimes we give more power to the sword rather than to the person. And I think that's where our youth needs to really understand. It's not the sword, it's the person. He could have had a stick and he would have done the same thing. So thank you for that there. Now, what we'll do, if you don't mind.
Hajj Abbas, I think you are trying to get the prize for yourself.
I do have the prize for myself.
Because you're asking all the questions from you. We don't
of course I get the prizes for everything. No. So let's look at the first question. Do you want me to choose the first question, or do you have a favorite question you'd like to answer out of the I've already sent you a list, but now I'm getting a few more. So we'll start with the ones that we've worked with so far that you've got copies of. Was there a question that you liked, or you want me to ask? Throw anything at you? All right, I'll choose a question. Let's go. All right, we'll choose a question. I'll make it difficult for you without getting myself in trouble. All right, we'll start with the first question that came in. So this question is from Brother Ali Nanji. I'll start with his question first. Is he here? Yes, he is here. Sorry? There's nothing anonymous when you send to this email address, okay? So unless it's, yes, it is, sorry, I'll rephrase that. If it's anonymous, we do keep it anonymous. This is not anonymous. Okay. The question he had was 2 questions. Then someone decided to ask 3 questions, but he's going, okay. What were the factors that after having announced the successorship of Imam Ali alayhi salam at Ghadeer in front of 100,000 Muslims, just 2.5 months later, only 5 or 7 people remained at Imam Ali's side?
Yeah.
What were the reasons for that happening?
The fact is why the people, after they pledged allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen, as we say, 120,000 people attended Al-Ghadeer, the event of Al-Ghadeer, and then later on, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was martyred and they attacked the house of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the narration says afterwards, Imam Sadiq mentions, and few narrations, some narration mentions that all the people irtaddu, they left. Apparently the meaning would seem that they left the religion. But 3, Salman, Abu Dhar and Al-Miqdad. It doesn't mention Ammar. We have narrations that mention 4. We have narrations that mention 7. First, there are 2 main expressions that we have to understand before answering this question. What's the meaning of irtadda? And who are the annas that irtaddu? First, al-irtidad has several meanings, but the main meaning is that when someone backs from something. As the verse that says about Prophet Yaqub, when al-qamis, the shirt of Prophet Yusuf, came back, they said, فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. He came back to become, he came back from being a blind person. So al-irtidad here is, it doesn't mean that they irtaddu an al-kufr. Several narrations, some scholars, they mention that al-irtidad, that they pledged allegiance, some of them, because from the beginning they didn't have that allegiance in their heart, they left. Some of them, irtaddu, they changed their mind. They pledged allegiance first, and then they didn't show that they pledged allegiance, and they changed their mind, and they went to attack Amir al-Mu'mineen first. Second, An-Nas, who are the people? The Muslims back then were about 250,000, but the Imam spoke about the people in the Medina who witnessed Al-Ghadeer and who witnessed the attack on the house. There were about 10,000. And there are some people that are outside the Medina that were in communication with the people inside the Medina, and they refused the allegiance as well. So what it means is that some of them, that they still believed in the allegiance and they still had their allegiance towards Amir al-Mu'mineen, but because out of fear, they sat down and they didn't move. And that's a big sin. This is the first point. Second point, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about al-irtidad an ad-din, going astray of the religion, the whole religion, there would be a condition. In every verse, there would be a condition. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There would be a condition, for example, that فَمَنْ يَرْتَدْ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِ كَذَا, unless he, for example, seeks forgiveness before death. Or like they will go astray unless they don't follow the khutuwat al-shaytan. For example, the verses are صلوا على محمد وآل محمد محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. One more time. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So the narrations mention that even after a while, some of those who pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, they changed their mind and they went back to Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. I can't find the verses. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد صلى على أحسن. So the verses that speaks about the ارتداد عن الدين يا أيها الذين آمنوا من يرتد منكم عن دينه فسوف يأتي الله بقوم يحبهم ويحبونه. Or the other verses ومن يرتد منكم عن دينه فيمت وهو كافر. Whoever goes astray of the religion and he dies on that situation. This is one of the conditions. If he dies on that situation فأولئك حبطت أعمالهم في الدنيا والآخرة. So here ارتداد, there were only 4 that they kept pledging allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen until they were forced to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr, and Amir al-Mu'mineen gave them permission. And there are those that they didn't pledge allegiance out of fear, those who didn't pledge allegiance because they have hatred towards Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. As for the factors that why these people they went back and they left the allegiance of Amir al-Mu'mineen, first, they didn't want someone like the Prophet salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, since Rasulullah appointed him as the wali after him. And these people, they wanted the dunya. They were attached to the dunya. They were attached to the women. They were attached to wine. They were attached to worshipping the idols. They wanted to do whatever they want. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, for 23 years, after he was ordered to tell the people that Ali was after him, he didn't, because he knew that they wouldn't accept until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatened him. He said, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. If you don't tell the people about Amir al-Mu'mineen, it's as if you didn't do anything. Another reason, as I said, the hatred of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this is one of the sacrifices as well of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, if he chose to fight, and this is one of the reasons why his name wasn't mentioned in the Quran as well. If Rasulullah, in order to preach for his religion, chose to fight himself and kill the people, people will have that grudge towards Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. This is first. Secondly, if he let others of the Muslimin to fight on his behalf and not let his family, people are going to lose trust with time. Then the only option for Rasulullah is to sacrifice his family. That's why he threw Amir al-Mu'mineen in the flames of the battles, as Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam says. And that's why they had that hatred towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this is one of the many reasons why Sayyid Ja'far Murtada al-Amili, he says Amir al-Mu'mineen, maybe his name wasn't mentioned because Amir al-Mu'mineen was the one who was taking the blame for everything, the people holding grudges against Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saw he can prevent the tahrif of the Quran later. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't mention his name. Otherwise, people who are worse than Al-Walid, the person who shot the Quran with the arrows, he says, أَتُهَدِّدُنِي بِجَبَّارٍ عَنِيدُ فَهَا أَنَا ذَا جَبَّارٌ عَنِيدُ. If you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's speaking to the Quran, on the day of judgment, tell him that Al-Walid tore me apart. People who are worse than this person would do tahrif to the Quran. So the hatred of Amir al-Mu'mineen, one of the reasons is the fee over their tribes. That's why when they went to the Saqifa, Al-Ansar wanted one from themselves. Al-Muhajirin wanted someone from themselves because they were afraid that the other party would not have respect towards the allegiance and they would take it for themselves. For love of the chair and leadership, which is a worldly thing, and one of the reasons as well, they never accepted the Islam from the beginning. These are the factors that.
Would you like to add anything to that, Sheikh, or can I ask?
The Sheikh pretty much covered everything. I wanted to add what the Sheikh, in a nutshell, is saying. There are factors, and for us to look at, that sway. And he mentioned several factors that cause the people to sway. And this is an example for us to be alert for this. But these things happen. And he mentioned the way people regulate. You know, they'll move away but come back. It's always about, you know, you go out of bounds and you get back in bounds. You know, and it happens. And people might sit there and question this. Like a Yahudi came up to, a Jew came up to Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he says, look at you, Muslims. He said, Ma nashafa ma'u nabiyukum. So he says that the water from the ghusl, yani, that you did for the dead body of your prophet hasn't gone dry, واختلفتم, and you're already fighting amongst each other. Imam Ali said to him, Ma nashafa al-ma' an rijalukum, an arjulikum, that the water did not get dry from your feet from crossing the river, the sea, and you told your prophet you want another God to worship. He says, well, our conflict came after our prophet. Your conflict came during your prophet's time. That's the difference. So conflict's there. It's present. The first point, the most important point the Sheikh said, is that you can return. That's what you got to remember. Admit, I'm wrong, come back. And this is the mercy of God. As he mentioned in his previous answer, where he said the Imam looks at 7 generations. Why? Because ultimately God created you for heaven, not for hell. Allah created everyone to go to heaven. And that's why when you read Surah Al-Baqarah, you go, oh my God, these Israelites, I would have burnt them. Look how many things they did. But that's not true. Because we do worse all the time. And God's showing you, listen, doesn't matter what you do, you can always come back. That's a very important point here. Even this, you rejected the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, come back. I'm always open. Even, as the Sheikh mentioned, if you die on that last second, just before you die, turn back. That's the most important point that you can gather from there. It's always come back. No.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up question, which I think is very important from the same person, is that the factors that you just discussed with regards to the Shias in Australia in 2022, how can we avoid getting caught up by them and assume and ensure that we are standing with the Imam, our 12th Imam, when he returns, when he reappears?
Look, I remember an example I heard from a friend of mine. He was giving a lecture about 23 years ago. And he gave this lecture, and in it he mentioned a good example. And I always liked this example. He said the example of monatomic, diatomic, and triatomic oxygen. He said monatomic oxygen is poisonous. Triatomic oxygen is poisonous. Diatomic, basically what we're saying, monatomic, for those that didn't do chemistry well or didn't do it, is just a single oxygen atom. The diatomic is O2 and the triatomic is O3, obviously 3 atoms, they're bonded. Now he said the O2 is the only one that's not poisonous, but O and O3 are poisonous. Rasulullah left you with Quran and Ahl al-Bayt. Add to them, poisonous. Remove one, poisonous. And this is the way you look at it. That them two only. You don't want to sway. Don't go. Anyone that gets up. See, when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, An-nasu, when he says to Kumail, he says, An-nasu thalath. Fa'alimun Rabbani. The first one he says, alim, as a scholar. وَمُتَعَلِّمْ عَلَى سَبِيلِ نَجَاةٍ, and the student. And then he says, وَهَمَجٌ رُعَى. So first he says the scholar. Then he says the student, the one learning from the scholar. The alim al-Rabbani, people must think, hold on, scholar, they're thinking of Sheikh, Sayyid. No. Alimun, in another hadith, the Imam says, we are the alim. That's why when you ask a marja, what are you? He says, talibu ilm. He doesn't say, mahsubak, ayatullah, al-uzma, fulan, fulani. This is the title people give them. He says, I'm talib. They call themselves talaba. You know, we're students of the Imam. So the scholar, and then there's the student, and the rest is hamajun ri'a. Hamajun ri'a is what we call the riffraff. the plebeians, or the what's another word? The laity, or the you know what I mean? The people that the commoners, the common folk. However, it's worse than this. Hamaj ru'a is. Have you ever seen the? I love using these examples. Have you ever seen a goat or the sheep? You know, when they got their tails over their backside and there's all these little insects floating around their backsides? That's hamaj ru'a. That's what it is. That's, in actual fact, that's what it is. You know, they're all circumambulating around the filthiest orifice on this animal. You know, that's what these people do. Because if you don't go to Ahlul Bayt, you'll be circumambulating around what? Around some heretic, some one of these YouTube ayatollahs. You know, one of those that gets up and starts talking, you know, out of his mouth, but, you know, is defecating from his mouth. But these people that get up and they start giving all this information that is against Ahlul Bayt. They interpret everything. If I turn away from Ahlul Bayt, Allah Azza wa Jal humiliates me. He makes me follow these clowns. That's what ends up happening to people. You turn away from the Imam, this is what happens. In another hadith, the Imam mentions alim wa muta'allim, and the third one, he mentions, what, I can't remember the word, but in English, it means, you know, when you're boiling the meat, you know that or bones or something, you know, at the top you get that white, thick, mucky, smelly stuff that you have to remove. I don't know what it's called, froth at the top. That's what he says the third type of people are. So when I turn away from them, it's not like I become an academic, you know, or I become some intellectual, or I become someone that belongs to Mensa. So no. You become the worst of society when you turn away from Ahlul Bayt. And this is what happens. See, when the Imam comes, no one, and I'll repeat this again and again, no one will deny it's the Imam. Did you know that? No one. It will be as clear as day that everyone will say, this is the Imam. You will not even have an iota of a doubt. Just like the people in Ghadeer. No one had an iota of a doubt. But then they start looking at personal situations listed by the Samahat Sheikh. Things, and this is what happens. And because of this, and they're used to swaying with the wind, أتباعه كل ناعق يميلون مع كل ريح, that they follow any caller and they go with the wind. You know, you ever seen when an insect's flying and the wind pushes it that way, it goes that way, pushes it that way, it goes. That's how they are. They just go with whoever calls, they follow. So when the Imam comes, they will know it's the Imam, but they'll turn away from the Imam. Do you know why? Because they're used to doing that. They're used to picking up a hadith and they say, Da'if. Da'if. The first thing he says. You read something, you'll say Da'if. You read something on the Daily Telegraph, you'll say Sahih. Picks up a tabloid, he says Sahih. Picks up Ruwaya and Ahlul Bayt, says Da'if. Straight away, it's weak. We do not accept it, it's weak. And he reads a tabloid and he says, this is true. This is how these people are. The second I become like this, I will turn away from the Imam. Don't believe that when the Imam comes, I'll change. No. La tanfa'u. You know, when we read Ziyarat al-Yasin, that the belief will not benefit you if you have not believed before. If you have not already accepted this, if your, if your way is to always reject, if you're a rejecter, you're always going to reject. The Imam comes, you're just going to reject. And if you're someone that has taslim towards Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi salamu alayhim ajma'in, then you will always be an acceptor. You'll always say that if this is right. I'm not saying if I read something I accept. I need to make sure, obviously, by going through the right ways, not in the wrong avenues that people take. So that's where the problem is going to be for the people of today, especially today where I'll be surprised, you know, sometimes you ask people who they're listening to. I was once talking to an atheist. I spoke to him for about half an hour. I told him, you listen to Sam Harris. He said, how'd you know? I go, because your genocidal thoughts. I know exactly who you are listening to when I talk to you. Why? Because I know the way that you think. You know, if you was listening to Christopher Hitchens, there'd be more philanthropy in his atheism. you know, rather than the other side. So when you're listening to certain people, if you're listening to, because these days anyone can open their own TV station, it's not hard. And there are a lot of people that will pay for these to continue. And the problem is when you're following them, obviously, if you see too much doubt, why do you still listen to these people? Why do people still listen? If you see the whole world says this person is a heretic, the whole world, it points fingers, why do you still follow them? One person was doing taqleed of one of these anomaly maraja. And I said, why did you stop doing his taqleed? I wanted to see his reasoning. He said, nothing. I just heard everyone saying, why would you do his taqleed? That was enough. Everyone kept saying this to me. That was enough for me to stop, at least go somewhere else. Go somewhere else that's safer. Because I'm obviously no longer in the ocean. I've walked into a swamp and I haven't realized that. Sorry about the long answer.
That's all right. The next question is from Brother Neeb, but I think you've answered the question already as to why Imam Ali was not mentioned in the Quran. His other two questions are not relevant for today, but I'll get you to answer that by email if that's okay. And we'll just skip those questions today if that's okay. Is that right? Or okay, yep, okay. So the next question I have is, so this was a good question. Yes. I'll come to you. I've got to finish because this was part of a competition and everyone had plenty of time to answer. So you need to, maybe I know I'd like to have the youth ask the question. I will come to you. Okay. So the question is this. So my burning question is, are there any incidents or references we can quote to Christians from their own books regarding Mubahilla? Was it ever recorded in any of their own books, or do any of their leaders know about it today?
All right, Sheikh wants me to take this. Sorry, you're going to have to hear my voice again. You know.
It's quite fine by us.
Okay. From what I've researched, I've never found any evidence of Mubahilla in non-Islamic text. But am I surprised? No. Why not? There used to be a pharaoh called Akhenaten. Akhenaten was the first pharaoh to go against the beliefs of the Egyptians. You know, he was the first to reject Ra and Amon and Isis and all that. We all reject Isis, but he was the first to reject all these deities. So what they actually did, you know, every pharaoh has a cartouche, which is their what? Their signature. They actually had a guy, I think his name was Henhombri or something. I can't remember what the guy's name was. His job was to actually remove the cartouche of Akhenaten from everywhere to the point no one knew he actually existed until they found his tomb. To absolutely erase him from history. Likewise, Moses does not exist in history. Did you know the first historical texts that mention Moses were about the 4th century BC? Before Christ, not before Common Era. So, 4th century BC. And even Jesus, they try to negate his existence. Even now, you're going to be surprised at this. Did you know the only texts, non-Islamic texts that speak about the Prophet were written 100 years or so after the Prophet? In fact, new historians are moving towards the point where they're saying the Sahaba, the companions, conjured up the figure of Rasulullah. He never actually existed. So you notice how in history, they delete things. Just something for your research. One thing, what's his name? The psychologist, Jordan Peterson. Not that I'll ever support this guy in any of his thoughts. He's a right-wing poster child. But he says that the reason why we don't study the Byzantium or the Byzantine Empire, he says because it's the shame of Christianity. Because the history of the Byzantine Empire is they were crushed by the Muslims. So that's why you'll never study it. It's really something you skim through in history. So anything where he says it's the shame of Christianity. So anything where it's going to demean, you know, Western civilization, they'll omit it. They won't even write it down. Even today, you know, a lot of the things that are current events that take place today, we don't know the whole story. You know, what am I talking about? You know, honestly, you sit down with people now, you're still trying to convince them that the Earth's elliptical. That's the type of people you're dealing with today. There's that many people that don't believe in modern scientific things. But current events that are taking place right now, people don't even know are happening. For example, I'll tell you something about the Hajj. How many of you, and raise your hands, know that the system that the Saudis implemented for the lottery to go to Hajj from the Western countries was by a company that was owned by Modi? How many of you know this? Raise your hand.
You're saying Modi, the Indian president?
The Hindu was the one that was, his company was the one that was in charge of, one of his companies was in charge of the lottery. How many people knew this? Current events, people have no idea what's going on. So these are details that they don't even mention to people today. So to find the actual event, sorry about the drag, I just wanted to give you an idea why you won't find it. And I really exhausted every mean to find, because even the Christians of Najran don't longer exist, and they were actual, the Christians of Najran actually came into Najran in the obviously because Christianity wasn't a religion till the 3rd or 4th century AD. They actually became a religion 400 years after Christ. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that. Christianity they were all Muslims, the followers of Christ. The actual religion, the Constantine religion, and the Bible that was compiled in the 4th century AD. It wasn't compiled at the time.
At Nicaea. At Nicaea.
At Nicaea. The one that was actually compiled in Nicaea no longer exists.
Yes.
It was destroyed completely. There was another one that was compiled 40 years after that. So that's the one that we have.
Just on that, just to clarify that item that we don't know what's going on, someone corrected me very quickly about the issues happening in Sri Lanka. And if you hear what's happened in Sri Lanka and you don't get told what was the game that was played 3-4 years ago that has created the mess we're in today, but no one mentions it. So it's a bit like that, where history gets removed to suit the powers at that time.
Hajj, it's funny you say this. I was actually talking to someone about Nepal, and I was telling him a story. This happened in a lot of your lifetimes, most except the kids. Don't you remember when the nephew slaughtered the entire royal family?
Yes.
And then they said the son did, and then the son killed himself, but he spared the uncle and the nephew. And then it just disappeared. No one ever spoke about it again. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Sri Lanka, that's...
Yeah, I think we don't read enough. But anyway, the next question from the list that we have, and then I'll go to the last ones there. I'm going to ask you both to keep it short and sweet now, if you don't mind. Brother Bakr will be asking me to finish in a few minutes. If Imam Ali alayhi salam was allowed his rightful place after the passing of the Prophet, would there have been a change in the development of Islam?
The answer to this, of course, I'm not going to get it from my pocket. We're going to get it from the words of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamu alayha. We all know that she gave 2 sermons that are known, Al-Khutbah al-Fadakiyya al-Ula, the first sermon of Fadak, and we have the second sermon of Fadak. The first sermon of Fadak was in the Masjid of Rasulullah, when she was in the bunch of women, and there was a curtain between them. The second one, when the women of Muhajirin and Ansar visited her when she was ill, she gave the second sermon, blaming them. What she said is, she said, وَيْحَهُمْ أَنْ زَحْزَحُوا عَنْ رَوَاسِ الرِّسَالَةِ. They moved the chair, they moved being the heir to being the Khalifa from رَوَاسِ الرِّسَالَةِ وَقَوَاعِدِ النُّبُوَّةِ, from the basis of prophethood, وَمَهْبِطِ الْوَحْيِ الْأَمِينِ, which means is Amir al-Mu'mineen, وَالطَّبِينُ بِأَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا وَالدِّينِ, the person who's most knowledgeable about the dunya and religion. Not just he's a professional about the religion of Rasulullah, even the ahwal ad-dunya, that is the major loss. ذلك هو الخسران المبين. And then she says, والله لو تكافوا عن زمام نبذه رسول الله إليه لاعتلقه. If they left, she makes a simile between that and how, like riding the camel. If they left, شو يعني الزمام شيخنا? The reins of the camel that Rasulullah gave to Amir al-Mu'mineen, he will hold it tight. وَلَسَارَ بِهِمْ سَيْرًا سَجَحًا. he will walk with them, with that convoy, a very smooth walk. لا يكلم خشاشه. Not everyone who's in that convoy will be wounded, of those who will hold on to the proper Islam that is being held by Amir al-Mu'mineen. وَلَا يُتَعْتَعُ رَاكِبُهُ. Even the one who's in that convoy, he won't even go into bumps in a way that is going to shake him. وَلَا أَوْرَدَهُمْ مَنْهَلًا نَمِيرًا فَضْفَاضًا. Manhal, Namir, Fadfad is a lot of positive, of course, characteristics of a pure, strongly flowing river, of a very pure water. That's where they are going to drink from. This is speaking about the positive, the importance of the teachings of the religion that will protect the dunya of the people and the akhirah. And imagine a world that's perfect, that there is no one is being harmed by any of the teachings. Now, a lot of the teachings are being inserted because of those who took the khilafah by force, that are harming the people, are causing harm. One of them is, for example, making the mut'a, for example, haram. Yeah? And it's something, a very great solution for the shabab, for them not to go astray or not to be attracted to things that are haram.
Sheikh said an important hadith that covered everything, and pretty much if they had adopted Ali ibn Abi Talib, they wouldn't be burdened by the shackles and they would have abundance. But I'm going to give you something with regard to your hereafter. The Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He says, لو اجتمع الناس على حب علي ibn Abi Talib. That if all the people united upon the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib, لما خلق الله النار. Allah would not have created the fire of hell.
Would you like to ask your question, young man?
You need to take into consideration that there is a grand scheme in all of it. For example, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi told everyone, there's one hadith where Ibn Abbas walks in and he actually tells him in detail how Imam Hussein is going to be killed. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he left Mecca, told everyone whoever comes with us is coming to die. That they know they're going to certain death. This is part of the grand scheme of things. And Allah tests the people in this way. This is part of what we call a prophecy. So we call a prophet because a prophet has a prophecy. He says this will come. This is a test for people to abstain because they know for sure if I go there, this is going to happen. Now, the Imam is commanded by God, just like the Prophet was commanded to marry certain wives, and the Imam was commanded to be patient when they took the Khalifa off him, you know. So there's things, so the Imam's commanded to eat. This is it. This is what's going to happen by God. It becomes part of God's grand scheme. And when we say God's grand scheme, not everything in God's grand scheme is 1 + 1 = 2 like we understand. See, Allah Azza wa Jal, He does things to test people. He does things, you know, for example, I've got to bring in my heroes into this, I have to. You know, when Allah Azza wa Jal allowed the Banu Israel to build the golden calf, sorry about the long answer, build the golden calf, He allowed the calf to make noise. And Nabi Musa said, oh Allah, you know, why did you allow the calf to make noise? He said, to test the people. This is how we test them. And it's likewise when Imam Mehdi takes the first and the second from the grave next to the Prophet, whoever they are, we don't know who they are. But he takes them and he puts them upon this dead tree. The tree will come to life and then the people will believe in them. You know, just as a test regarding that they were just pulled out of their graves. So Allah Azza wa Jal does this, even though you might see, hold on, why is God doing this? As part of the test. And part to test us with, that Allah does it as a fitna for us, as a trial. So to see if we follow. It's not like, because frankly, it would be impossible for the Imam not to know. Why would it be impossible for the Imam not to know? So Allah has given them the knowledge of the unseen. Isn't that right? كَانَ عَنْدَهُمْ عِلْمَ مَا كَانَ وَعِلْمَ مَا يَكُونَ. It's impossible for the Imam not to know. We have what's called Amrul Bida, which is another discussion altogether, where the will of God changes for us, and it's relative to us, but we don't understand the knowledge of God for us to delve into this, to go into this. But what I'm trying to say is it's impossible for it to be out of the Imam's knowledge, because Allah has given them this knowledge, and this is how they have to deal with the situation. And it's not considered suicide per se. It's Allah Azza wa Jal decreeing that they have to do this, and they have to, as the Quran says, عِبَادٌ مُكْرَمُونَ لَا يَسْبِقُونَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ وَهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِ يَعْمَلُونَ. That they are servants of God, they're ennobled servants of God, that they do not act without God's permission. Sorry about the long response.
So, look, I've got quite a few questions. I'm going to last two questions, right? And I'm going to stick to the questions of, to the Eid Ghadeer type questions. The rest, if you don't mind, I'll send to you to answer, if you don't mind, privately, right? So the one question we have is that, is Eid Ghadeer celebrated in heaven, and is it got any special significance in heaven?
Of course, it has a different name in heaven, as the narration says by Imam Rida alayhi salam. He says, يوم العهد المعهود والميثاق المأخوذ. It was the day of the vow al-ahd al-ma'hud that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made to the people. والميثاق المأخوذ, that allegiance that was taken from the people. And of course, as the Imam says, that it's for the inhabitants of heaven is bigger and greater than it is for the inhabitants of the earth. Yeah.
Okay. Last question is slightly off the topic of Eid Ghadeer, but it's come through there. And I'm summarizing the question, and I think I think we need to be careful how we answer this question. So just a heads up in front of that. It is live. The question is that in Ashura we recite Ziyarat Ashura and we condemn or we send lanat on certain people. And if we know the people who have taken the Khalifa of the Imam Ali alayhi salam, why do people stop us doing that? I'm not sure who stops, but that's the question, is that there? And why should we stop them? Gently, gently, gently.
You're not going to be gentle. Who stops?
Well, that's what I didn't know either. So
look, there are some people that don't say it because they believe that the ziyarah is false.
I know.
That's their belief.
No, I mean, the question is, I think, more about the, I guess, cursing or condemning the three caliphs that took the rifle badge.
Well, there's a chapter in Sahih Muslim that's called if anyone the Prophet curses or swears to or hits without haqq, without the right, then it's a blessing upon them. This is the actual chapter in Sahih Muslim. So if the Prophet curses a believer, it's a blessing for them. So when the Prophet cursed those that left Jaysh Osama, who are mentioned in Ziyat Ashura, then it was a blessing for them according to these people. So I don't know why they're upset about it.
All right. Look, thank you very much, inshallah, for your time. If there's any super duper question that I've missed about Ghadeer or Mubahilla, going once?
I would like to ask one.
Yes.
Very quick one. In my debates, one of the things which comes up a lot of times is if the message of Ghadeer was very important, why didn't the Holy Prophet mention it in Arafah and not in Ghadeer? That's the first part. And the second part is the ayah which we usually use, Akmaltu lakum dinakum, Surah number 5, ayah number 3. It is usually in as part of a big ayah, which talks about all the fiqh masail of how we slaughter, what are we supposed to eat, khinzir and everything, and then akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu ni'mat. And then the ayah again continues and then stops. But what we say is that we have completed this religion today and we have given Islam as a dina. It comes in between a lot of, it's a huge ayah. Yeah. Why is it that, how does that fall in context? This is my question.
So Brother Uneeb's not going to be very upset because he asked the same question.
No, this is a very important question. First, Al-Ghadeer, some of the Sunni scholars that they mentioned that it happened in Arafah. In fact, the majority of the Sunni scholars and our narrations unanimously, I mean not unanimously, the Shia, all narrations they speak about that it happened after Hajjat al-Wada in the area of Ghadeer Khum. Secondly, when it comes to why the verse of Ikmal was mentioned before Tabligh. First, logically, if we want to say that the verses are according to the chronological order and how they happened, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't tell the Prophet that today I completed your religion, and then later on tells him, deliver what I told you. If he completed the religion, why does he have to deliver something else? Firstly. Secondly, we know, and this is mentioned in the tafsir of the Sunnah more than what we have, is that Surah Al-Ma'idah came down twice. The verse of Ikmal came down twice. First, Surah Al-Ma'idah was mentioned all together, and because the people, they have the smart ones, and they have the dumb people, they have the people, the young, they have the adults, different kind of mentalities. And there's an important introduction, sorry.
Take your time.
And it's a very important question because it has a lot of introductions to it. What's it called? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, when he came with miracles, not for everyone. Some people believed through intellect. Some people, they needed miracles for two reasons. Either because they didn't want to believe, like those who asked for a feast and then yet they went back with Prophet Musa alayhi salam. They asked for signs and miracles, and then they were the first ones to disbelieve. And then there are those that are not smart enough, or they don't have the mentality of Ja'far and Khadija and those who first believed in Rasulullah. They needed miracles. So those who were stubborn and they didn't want to believe, even with the miracles, they existed. And those who are not smart enough. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to deliver it slowly. Like Ghulibat al-Rum, when he mentions Ghulibat al-Rum, it was way before it happened. And then when Surah Al-Ma'idah came down once, with time, every event happens, there is a revelation of the verse again. So when Ayat al-Tabligh came down, and then afterwards, after the whole surah was mentioned, Ayat al-Tabligh came down, and then later on, after the Rasulullah, when he held the hand of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ayat al-Ikmal came down. And why they are not mentioned, we don't know. As the Sheikh mentioned the answer before, it's a divine wisdom that we shouldn't, like, you can't say, for example, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention the ruku' in the salat? Ahsan, so you're going to continue.
No. I'm just saying the Quran wasn't compiled in chronological order. That's something like the Mehdi Sheikh mentioned about the first surah that was revealed was what? Everyone should know this. Alaq. What was the second one? Surah Al-Qalam. What was the third one? Surah Al-Qalam. I think the third one was Surah Al-Duha. The fourth was, so if you look at them, they're all backward. Mudathir, Muzammil, إذا الشمس كورت. That's pretty much the order that they came. Are they in chronological order in the Quran? So even the first one is what the Samah the Sheikh said. Secondly, the Quran was compiled different to chronological order. Otherwise, everything would have been. And there's also strategic positioning. Imagine إنما يريد الله was anywhere else, it would have been removed. But it was stuck right between the women, the wives of the Prophet, you know. So it was just stuck there, and people would have got excited. Wives of the Prophet, Sahaba, just leave it there. And they would have left it. There's this strategy by Allah Azza wa Jal. It stays there, so they will never remove it. Because anything belonging to their heroes, they don't get rid of it. Sorry, I have to always bring them in. I can't help it. It's just an attraction.
Sheikhs, thank you very, very much. Inshallah, I know you've got the programs for Muharram coming. I think Sheikh Mohammed is traveling to Perth, and Sheikh Mohsen to Canberra. Inshallah, may all your efforts be accepted by Allah. Just finishing with one thing, I think that you said regarding Imam Ali alayhi salam, looking at the 7 generations before doing something. I think it's an example for us to be a little bit patient with those who may not be on the right path. That if Imam Ali alayhi salam could give 7 generations and not fight them, we shouldn't be condemning people today. We need to back off and not condemn people. And I think that's one thing that we need to do. And the last thing I would leave with is that I see that our Imam, sorry? Living people. Yes. No, I know that. I know the heroes that you like to discuss. No, I didn't mean that. And the second thing is that, you know, our Imams always acted with absolute perfection. Right? And at no time did they tell anyone to follow them. And one of the examples that I like, that I think we see in the period of Muharram that will come, a couple comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and gives their life without knowing him beforehand, right? So we need to act in a way to attract people. And we need ways to make sure people see who we are, and that's by being ourselves first and foremost. And as I said to someone yesterday, let's not try and convert the rest of the world to Shia first. Let's fix ourselves first. So inshallah, please, if in the month of Muharram, use it as an example to get closer to Allah through the beauty of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his companions. And may Allah bless, inshallah, all of our sheikhs and give them the strength to continue preaching in this wonderful way. And inshallah we will continue. I think this style works. Who prefers this rather than a lecture from Sheikh? Who prefers me here at the front all the time? Come on, some hands up. That kills me. Bas, I'll hand over to you now for the ziyarat. Per Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباقر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي التقي، وعلي بن محمد الهادي، والحسن بن علي العسكري، والخلف الهادي المهدي، حجتك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم عجل في فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره وشيعته ومحبيه والمستشهدين بين يديك، ورحمة الله